The highway that takes you where you died. Part 1, the first loop. The highway never looked the same twice. That was what Miguel Ortiz had learned in 20 years of on-call nights as a mechanic on the stretch of Route 63 between Pima Junction and Drywell, a lonely ribbon of asphalt that ran like a scar across the Arizona desert. When the moon was new and the wind lay down, the road could look like a polished black blade under an impossible sky. When wind kicked up, the sand would blur the shoulders into a gray fringe and the road seemed to float in a cloud. Trucks came through sometimes. On the worst nights only the coyotes kept him company. He liked the emptiness. It paid his bills. It let him think without interruption. He liked that after midnight the world felt like a separate, darker town, one that owed him nothing and asked for nothing in return. Then the loop started. Miguel first noticed something wrong on a Tuesday when the motel's ancient TV was playing a sheriff's procedural rerun and his diner coffee had gone cold on the counter. He'd been closing up the shop, locking the rusted toolbox, sweeping the floor, when the radio on the workbench flipped channels, static blooming between stations, then steadying on a frequency that played nothing but a thin, humming tone. Miguel frowned and hit the dial. The shop radio was fused. It always made a sound when it warmed up. Tonight it sounded like a heartbeat. He had 40 minutes to make it the 12 miles up Route 63 to his apartment off the highway. The winter had been kind, the roads were clear and the sky strangely bright with a band of stars that seemed too close. He locked the door and climbed into his truck, the diesel thrum settling under him like a familiar animal. The dashboard clock read 1:51 a.m. There was nothing out of the ordinary until the device on his dash, a small aftermarket scanner he used to monitor CB chatter for stranded drivers, chirped at 2:10 a.m. He clicked it and leaned forward. A voice whispered through the shackled hiss of static, Route 63, reset, 11 past 2. Miguel's first thought was prank. Some trucker with earbuds and a taste for the theatrics. He shook his head and drove on. The desert hummed and the highway opened before him in a silver slice of pavement. The radio fell quiet. At 2:11 his headlights hit the gouged asphalt where a semi had torn the shoulder last month, the same cut in the road he had meant to repair this week. It was bright and raw under his beams, but it wasn't the shoulder that made his chest drop. It was the billboard to his right. The billboard had been a faded advertisement for a motel, burgundy letters peeling away, with a phone number that had belonged to a family, then a motel, then abandoned. But now the billboard read, Daniel's Diner, open 24 hours, 1957. The board was new. The wood looked lacquered. A neon arrow glowed faint and blue. The diner had burned down in 1991. Miguel had helped haul the charred guttering away himself. He should have known every nail on that stretch of highway. He blinked and the neon arrow stuttered, like a staccato heartbeat. The air tasted metallic. The dash clock slipped, jittered, and then snapped to 2:11. His tires hummed differently, like the asphalt had changed to a different grind, a different age. A truck passed him in the opposite lane, an old model, fat and boxy, with chrome that shone like polished teeth. No driver visible. Miguel told himself to pull over, to take a breath. He could go back to town. He could ignore the feeling in his ribs and hand the job off to someone else. But he had been on the highway his whole adult life. He trusted the road the way a farmer trusts a plow. This small inversion nagged at him like an insect bite. 20 miles down, where the cracked median sign announced Drywell, the whole scene had changed again. The sign now read, Drywell, Pop 1832, a figure the town hadn't claimed since the 70s. He rubbed his eyes. The trucker on the radio spoke again, a whisper this time clearer. "Watch your mirrors, Ortiz." Miguel's skin prickled. He checked the rear view and saw headlights, not a pattern of approaching lights, but a set of headlights that came up behind him and matched his speed, then fell in step with him without ever overtaking. For a minute they stayed there like a shadowing presence, close enough he could feel the heat on his neck, then vanished as if swallowed by the night itself. When he reached the turnoff to his apartment, a storage pad and an old shingled unit, the digital clock on the motel sign out front read 3:07. He frowned. The truck's clock still read 2:13. He shook his head. The motel clock must be wrong. He parked and crawled into bed, furious at the unease that had laced his evening. His phone buzzed in the morning. "Crash up at mile 17, a text read from Sheriff Gentry. Semi down. Driver dead. Westbound. You free?" Miguel's thumb hovered. He stood and dressed, tensing without wanting to admit why. The highway had changed at 2:11. He'd felt it under the tires. But the sheriff's text was south of that, and his conscience tugged him into gear. He had to be useful. He had to be where he was needed. When he reached the scene, there was a long ribbon of police tape and a cluster of emergency vehicles with flashing blues that cut the dawn like quick cold. Sheriff Gentry met him at the edge of the wreckage, his face in that hunted mode it went into when something didn't add up. "Ortiz," Gentry said without greeting. "You know this stretch?" Miguel nodded. "Like the back of my hand." Gentry led him closer. Under tarps and orange cones, the cab lay crushed like a can. The driver had been ejected and found still, his breath gone and a small pooling of blood like a dark stain on the gravel. Nothing unusual in the dead man's ID, a trucker passing through with a logbook full of runs along Route 63. "Helpless," the doc said Gentry. "No signs of foul play. Auto accident." His voice had that rough edge of someone who'd seen his share of roadside tragedies and had stopped letting shock into his body. Miguel nodded. He did not want to be insensitive. He'd patched up more than a few stranded travelers, and he knew the quiet, inevitable weight of roadside death. But a thought he could not scrub out, an image of headlights matching his speed the night before, shivered under his ribs. He watched the technicians lift a tarp. For a second, he saw from the corner of his eye something he couldn't name in the dust. Later, back at the shop, he watched the video from his dashcam. He rewound the segment around 2:11 and moved frame by frame. His breath slowed with each microsecond. The image across the highway bent like a mirage and rearranged. At 2 hours 11 minutes and 1 second the billboard flickered to the diner sign. At 2 hours 11 minutes and 3 seconds the truck with no visible driver slid past him. At 2 hours 11 minutes and 8 seconds the headlights that had matched his speed momentarily glowed brighter, and then, his stomach dropped. The camera captured something he'd never thought to expect, himself. Not his truck. A human silhouette wearing his jacket stepping into frame on the shoulder, turning to look straight into the lens, as if acknowledging his present self watching from inside the cab. Miguel's hands shook so hard he had to set the laptop down. He scrubbed backward. The silhouette was gone. The footage filled with static. He scrubbed forward. The image returned at 2 hours 11 minutes and 22 seconds, this time the figure clearly in the middle of the lane 100 yards ahead. And then the frame cut to black. He called Gentry and demanded answers. Why would footage that showed a person on the shoulder abruptly go black? The sheriff shrugged as if used to the mystery of the cameras on the stretch. He'd seen many a rig's feed go glitchy out here. Old tech, Ortiz. Spooky night. People spin stories. But Gentry's eyes were wary. He had listened to drivers who told of phantom signs, kids who swore they'd seen a diner open on a dead highway down in the valley. Legends were old here. Route 63 kept its histories. Miguel slept badly that night. He dreamed of headlights that shone into his open eye and of a road that unfurled under his tires into familiarity and then into something else. He woke with the taste of metal in his mouth and called in to his morning shift. He would be late. The pattern emerged in the days after, a dozen tiny anomalies that added up to a shape he did not want to name. A gas station that advertised an old brand name that had folded in 1992, a mapmaker's sign showing a short-lived detour from 1974, a motel neon that flashed in perfect retro pink and spelled someone's first name in a font they'd used the year Miguel was born. People described the highway resetting in hushed tones to dates that mattered: the year of a school fire, the day a diner closed, the morning someone drove off the road and never came back. The time stamp on the digital clocks and dashcams tended to jitter around 2:11 a.m., 11 past 2, as if that small interval was the hinge on which the world swung. Then the calls started. Drivers called in with the same last line, described in a dozen accents. I just saw a version of myself broke down on the side of the road. He waved, but when I looked again he was gone. Or, there was a kid on the shoulder, looked just like me when I was 19. Or the worst of the calls, I saw myself in a ditch, bloody, and I know I was the one who died there before. How is that possible? Miguel kept a ledger. He wrote it down and crossed names. The names spooled into a map that looked wild and impossible. People claimed to see either versions of themselves or versions of others, sometimes old and sometimes impossibly future-scarred, standing at mile markers and leaning on rusted signs like props in a play. On the sixth night after his first loop, Miguel didn't sleep at all. He packed his camera gear, a spare tire, an emergency lantern, and a thermos of coffee into the truck. He told himself he was going out of curiosity. He told himself he wanted footage he could hand to Sheriff Gentry to make the whole town stop whispering. He told himself he was not going to let whatever this was spook him into moving. He arrived at the stretch of route where the resets seemed most intense, mile markers between 16 and 19. He knew this place. The shoulders here were soft and the terrain rolled like a stomach. He parked on a back road and watched the pavement from the dark. At 2:08 the highway was itself, black, unremarkable, lined with sagging guardrails and the blink of indifferent stars. At 2:10 the air tightened, like a band compressing around a box. He felt it in his chest, a pressure at his collarbones that made his breathing sudden and shallow. At 2:11, the asphalt rearranged. The night loosened and re-stitched itself like a seam. Billboards polished and flipped to older advertisements. An old rusted Chevy idled up the road that had been absent for decades. A man in a worker's jacket stepped into the shoulder. He looked like someone out of a faded Polaroid. He turned his head toward Miguel and waved. Miguel waved back. The man's face was not a stranger's. It was Miguel's face. There was a bruise along the cheek that Miguel did not have, and a line, a scar, that he had never seen in the mirror. The man's jacket was older. The man's collar was turned up. The man's chest rose in a rhythm that matched Miguel's own. When the figure's eyes met his, it felt like a hand taking him by the throat. Miguel could feel the shape of his heart in his ears. He raised the camera and zoomed, hands shaking. The figure turned away and stepped toward the nearest guardrail. He dragged his hand along the metal like someone checking for rust, then, he dropped to his knees and then lay in the ditch in a motion that looked so calm it made the hair stand on Miguel's arms. Miguel turned the lens and cleaned his throat, breathing fast. He called out, voice rough, "Hey, you okay? You need help?" The figure looked up at him. The face was his, but older. The eyes had that hollow look of someone who had been undone by a single long mistake. He smiled, or tried to, but the motion was flat and sad. "You shouldn't watch," he said. Then he raised one hand and pointed down the road. Miguel's chest clenched. He looked where the figure indicated and saw headlights burst like a comet's tail into the frame. A truck, older than anything made in the last decade, battered and monstrous, slammed down the lane. Miguel saw the driver's head snap like a rag doll as the cab pitched and the rig clipped the guardrail, its weight pitching the truck into the ditch where the figure had lain. Miguel's camera fell from his hands. He scrambled, stumbling down the embankment just in time to see splintered chrome and steel fold inward and the smell of fuel blossom in the air. The truck's cab was caved in like a crushed can. The driver, still slumped over the wheel, was unconscious. There was no sign of the man he'd seen in the shoulder. Miguel's phone read 2:14. He stared at the spot where the figure had been and found only the flattened privacy of a disturbed ditch, a small pool of oil in the scrub. He moved closer and found something that knotted his stomach, a fabric scrap caught in the brush. It was part of a jacket, the same color as his. He pocketed it without conscious thought. He climbed back to his truck and sat, legs numb. The headlights of the night seemed ordinary again, the road. He replayed the footage until the edges of sleep trembled. The feed ended at 2 hours 11 minutes and 34 seconds, then resumed again at 2 hours 13 minutes and 59 seconds with the truck already wrecked. There was no frame that showed the cause. There was no frame that showed the figure had moved from the shoulder into the ditch. He called Sheriff Gentry. "You seen footage?" Miguel asked, voice filmy. Gentry's voice was flat. "Kid, people will see the things they need to on that road. You want to chase phantom doubles? Fine. But be careful." Miguel swallowed. "Who was that out there?" "He looked like me." A long pause. Gentry exhaled. "Some call them ghosts, Ortiz. Some call them echoes. I don't like it either. But, if you're serious, clean up the footage and bring it in." Miguel hung up and watched the road until dawn. He felt pulled in two directions, the knowledge that he had been looking at himself, and the fear that this had been something else entirely, a warning, or an invitation. As the sky cracked open with light, he drove home with the scrap of jacket in his pocket, a small token of an impossibility he could not explain. He did not yet know that the scrap would start to smell faintly of old smoke the next night, or that when he unfolded it under his lamp he would find a thread of stitching that matched the pattern of a jacket his father had worn in photographs. He did not yet know that the first trucker at the diner the next afternoon would say, with an expression like someone recalling something they would rather forget, "You see yourself out there? Don't stare too long. The road gets lonely and it gives you company. Sometimes the company doesn't want to leave." He thought then that he might have to leave. But the road had a way of changing a man's mind. And Miguel had always been a man who fixed what broke. The desert was quieter the next night, but Miguel felt watched long before he reached Route 63. Not watched by a person. Not by an animal. Watched by the road. That idea irritated him. A mechanic was supposed to trust asphalt the way a sailor trusts a map. Highways weren't mystical, they were built by contract workers and repaired with hot mix and diesel fumes. Miguel didn't believe in ghosts. But he believed in what he'd seen. The man in the ditch. The old-time vehicles that didn't exist anymore. The billboard that reverted to a sign from 1957. The truck accident replaying itself like a memory of a memory. And worst of all, the older version of himself looking into the camera with a sadness that felt like a warning. Miguel couldn't shake the feeling that something had chosen to show him all of it. At 11:45 p.m., he pushed himself out of bed, paced, cursed the ceiling, and then got into his truck with the resigned frustration of a man who knew he was going back even though part of him knew he shouldn't. Just footage, he muttered to himself. Gather proof. Bring it to Gentry. No more ignoring this. He filled a thermos with coffee, packed the dashcam tightly, and took the old .38 revolver from his father's drawer, not because he expected danger, but because men said it made them feel in control. He drove. The abandoned diner that shouldn't exist. At 1:53 a.m., 8 minutes before the bend in reality usually hit, Miguel reached mile marker 17. The moon was low and orange, more like a dying street lamp than a celestial body. He parked on a turnout and waited. 1:58. 1:59. 2 o'clock. Miguel tapped his thumb along the steering wheel. The road lay ahead in a perfect straight line, quiet as bone. Heat shimmered off patches of leftover asphalt, even in the cold. 2:05. 2:07. His heart climbed. 2:10. The dash clock flickered. 2:11. The world shifted. Not violently. Not with a bang. Just a soft bending, like seeing a reflection on a warped mirror. Miguel blinked and the billboard that had been blank rust an hour ago now displayed a bright, freshly painted sign. Daniel's Diner, best pie in the desert, open 24 hours. The neon buzzed faintly in pale blue and pink. But the diner wasn't just on the billboard. It was on the roadside. The real diner. Fully restored. Lights on. Chrome shining. A soft glow inside. Miguel's breath caught in his throat. He pulled the truck onto the shoulder and stared. That diner had burned to nothing 3 decades ago. He had been 10 when it happened, standing in his father's arms, watching the flames through the police line. His father worked on half the vehicles that passed through the town. Locals wept that night, losing what had been a communal home of sorts. And now here it was. Perfect. Alive. Breathing light. Miguel turned off his truck and stepped outside. The night hummed. Somewhere a dog barked and then quieted sharply, as if startled. He approached the diner cautiously, boots crunching on gravel. As he reached the window, he saw silhouettes inside. A man at the counter. A woman pouring coffee. 2 teens in a booth. Laughing quietly. A trucker wiping grease from his hands with a blue rag. The scene was warm, familiar, ordinary. But no sound emerged. Not laughter. Not voices. Not the clink of silverware. The entire scene moved like a silent film behind glass. Miguel touched the window. Cold. He whispered, "What are you?" No reply. But the man at the counter turned and looked directly at Miguel. He froze. The counterman had Miguel's face. Not older. Not younger. Exactly Miguel's age, except thinner, exhausted, wearing the same uniform he'd worn at the shop 3 years ago. As Miguel whispered, "No, no, no, no," the counterman smiled weakly, lifted his coffee, and mouthed a word. "Run." Then, the diner lights snapped off. Miguel stumbled back. Darkness swallowed the interior. The neon flickered, sputtered, died. The billboard went blank. And the diner vanished. Just vanished. Gone. Miguel stood alone in the cold desert at 2:12 a.m., staring at empty highway. His pulse hammered hard enough to feel in his teeth. "What the hell is this road doing to me?" he whispered. A second version of his truck. Miguel returned to his truck, hands shaking. He sat in the driver's seat, took a long, harsh gulp of coffee, and steadied his breath. He turned the ignition. Then froze. Headlights approached from behind. Slow. Steady. Bright. Miguel turned to look through the mirror. A truck was coming. Same model as his. Same paint color. Same cracked front fender. Same dent above the rear wheel. He blinked. No, it wasn't just similar. It was his truck. Down to the rust on the bumper. Miguel whispered, "That's impossible." The duplicate truck slowed as it approached, then came to a stop 20 feet behind him. Its headlights stayed on. Its engine idled. But no one stepped out. Miguel reached for his revolver instinctively. For almost a full minute, neither truck moved. Then the driver's door of the duplicate truck opened. Miguel held his breath. A man stepped out. Not a shadow. Not a glitch. Not a phantom. A full, physical man. And it was Miguel. This version of him wore a torn shirt, blood on the collar, and a thick bandage around his head. He limped slightly. He clutched something in his right hand, a metal object, shiny and small. Miguel stared at him in horror. What the hell? The other Miguel raised his hand to show the object. Miguel's stomach twisted. It was a set of keys. His keys. Then the bloody Miguel whispered across the quiet desert. "Your death is here." Miguel's mind broke for a second, unable to comprehend the words. "What?" he gasped. "What did you say?" The other Miguel pointed down the dark highway. And Miguel saw it. A semi-truck barreling toward them at unnatural speed. Lights shaking violently. Engine screaming like a dying thing. Miguel dove into his real truck. Started the engine. Slammed the door. The bloody Miguel didn't move. He just watched. Calm. Still. Inevitable. Miguel stepped on the gas and swerved off the shoulder as the semi roared past, missing him by inches, but smashing straight into the duplicate truck. The sound exploded across the desert, metal crumpling like paper. Miguel screamed, braced, and skidded to a halt in a flurry of gravel. He stumbled out of his truck, breath ragged, ears ringing. The duplicate truck was twisted metal, flames licking the edges. He ran toward the wreck, shouting, "Hey! Are you okay? Hey, Ichiwai!" But the duplicate Miguel was gone. Not crushed. Not thrown. Not burned. Just gone. No body. No footprints. Only the metal object he'd held earlier lay on the ground. Miguel picked it up with trembling fingers. It wasn't a key. It wasn't metal. It was a dog tag. He wiped the soot from the engraved letters. His breath caught in his throat. It read, Ortiz, Miguel J. DOB, November 6, 1986. DOD 02/11/20. The date of death field ended with a dash. Unfinished. Miguel dropped the dog tag in horror. No, 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 no. He staggered back. The desert swayed. His lungs tightened. That thing in the diner had looked at him and mouthed, "Run." The older Miguel in the ditch had pointed toward danger. The bloody Miguel had said, "Your death is here." 3 versions. 3 warnings. He felt the truth solidify in his chest like a stone. This highway doesn't show ghosts. It shows every version of you that ever died here. Miguel sank to his knees, shaking. If those versions existed, then somewhere on this road, sometime in the future, in one possible timeline, Miguel Ortiz died, and the road was trying to show him how. Footprints behind him. He forced himself up, breathing raggedly. He couldn't stay here. He turned back toward his truck and froze. There were footprints in the gravel behind him. His footprints. Not from tonight. Not from last night. These were old. Deep. Multiple sets. Layered on top of each other. As if he had walked this exact patch of desert hundreds of times. Miguel's heartbeat pounded in his throat. He crouched down and traced the outline of one. Then another. Then another. All identical tread. All identical weight. All his. He whispered, voice trembling. How many versions of me have died on this road? A dry wind swept across the asphalt. From somewhere far off, he heard a voice he couldn't place. Too many. Miguel spun around, but no one was there. Just shifting sand. Just empty desert. Just the road. Waiting. Always waiting. The scrap of jacket. Miguel climbed into his truck, still shaking, still tasting dust and terror in his teeth. He drove slowly back toward Drywell, headlights cutting a long, lonely path. When he pulled into his apartment lot, he sat in silence for a long time. His hands shook so badly he had to grip the wheel with both fists. Finally he went inside. He turned on every light. The scrap of jacket he'd kept, the one he'd found at the first accident, lay on the table where he left it. Miguel forced himself to unfold it. A smell hit him. Smoke. Old smoke. Fire from decades ago. And on the hem, he saw 4 letters stitched in faded thread. J. or his father's name. Javier Ortiz. Miguel's breath left his lungs. My father died on this road too. Not in a car crash. Not in hospital. No. Javier Ortiz died here, on Route 63, in 1991, returning home after a late shift. Miguel had been 10. He remembered only fragments. He whispered. This road killed him, and it's showing it to me. The scrap trembled in his hands. A voice whispered behind him. Miguel. Miguel spun around, heart in his throat. His living room was empty. But in the reflection of the darkened window, a faint figure stood behind him. Not a ghost. Not a phantom. A man. Older. Weathered. wearing his father's jacket. And he said, "Don't come back to the highway tomorrow." The reflection flickered. The figure vanished. Miguel backed away, breath shaking uncontrollably. "What is happening? Dad, what's happening?" No answer. Only the whisper of the desert wind outside. And the dawning realization. Tomorrow, the highway wasn't just going to show him how he died. It was going to finish the unfinished date on the dog tag. The clock read 3:07 a.m. Miguel sat on the floor. His heart pounded so violently he feared it might stop. For the first time, one thought settled cold and absolute. If he returned to Route 63 tomorrow, he might not come back. Miguel didn't sleep the next day. He didn't even sit. He paced the apartment like a man walking the perimeter of a shrinking cage, palms sweating, mind circling the same thought. Don't come back to the highway tomorrow. His father's voice, or the version of his father the road had created, kept echoing in his skull. And the dog tag. And the duplicate truck. And the diner. And the graveyard of footprints behind him. Most people didn't get warnings before they died. But Miguel was getting too many. When the sun rose, streaking orange across the blinds, he made a choice. He picked up his phone and called Sheriff Gentry. "Sheriff," he said, "I need to talk. In person. Now." Gentry sighed. "Ortiz, if this is about the highway." "It is. And you know more than you're saying." Silence on the other end. Then, "Meet me in my office at noon." Miguel hung up. Something in that silence felt wrong, as if Gentry had been expecting this call. He left the apartment immediately, needing air, needing motion. His hands shook as he drove down the empty desert road into town. He parked outside the sheriff's station. Before he went inside, he noticed someone sitting on the bench under the shade of the flagpole, a woman wrapped in a red flannel jacket, pushing sand into little piles with her boot. Skinny, angular, hair cut short and messy, eyes sharp and alert. She looked up and spoke first. "You're Miguel." Miguel stopped mid-step. "Do I know you?" "No," she said. "But I know your truck. And the scrap of jacket you've been carrying around that scares the piss out of you." Miguel stiffened. "Who are you?" She flicked sand off her boot and stood. "Name's Harper. And if you're seeing yourself on Route 63, then it's already too late to pretend you've got choices." Miguel stared. "How do you know what I've seen?" She leaned against the pole, arms crossed. "Because I've seen my own shadows out there. 10 of them. Maybe more. Every life I could have lived and every life I lost. This road doesn't show ghosts, Ortiz. It shows the versions of us the desert kept." Miguel's mouth went dry. "You survived it?" Harper snorted. "Survived? No. You don't survive Route 63. You negotiate with it." Miguel blinked. "How long have you been dealing with this?" 3 years. "And you're the only one?" "No." She glanced at the sheriff's building. "Gentry knows. So did your father." Miguel's heart lurched. "My father?" "Yeah," Harper said. "Javier Ortiz. I never met him, but I know his story. Everyone does. The highway picked him up one night and wouldn't let him go." Miguel clenched his fists. "He died in an accident." Harper raised an eyebrow. "He died twice." Miguel felt the world tilt under his feet. Twice. Harper stepped closer, lowering her voice. The first time was the real crash. The second time, the highway replayed it to someone else years later, like a warning. Like how it's replaying yours now. Miguel stumbled back, stunned. You're saying the highway replays deaths? No, she said. The highway remembers deaths. And memory becomes geography out there. Miguel's throat tightened. And the versions of me? The ones I saw? Harper exhaled slowly. Those aren't illusions. They're fragments of the timeline. Shadows of who you became in versions of the world that ended here. Miguel couldn't breathe. So, every possible version of me that could have died on Route 63 does die, Harper finished. And the road keeps them. He tried to steady his breath. And why am I seeing them now? Harper hesitated. Then, because it's your turn. Time tries to correct itself. When a person is supposed to die on that road, the highway starts showing them all the failed attempts and near misses. A preview of fate. Miguel whispered, I don't want a preview. Harper smiled grimly. Neither did I. But you're already marked. He felt cold sweat bead on his forehead. Can I stop it? Harper looked at him with sympathy sharp enough to hurt. That depends, she said. Do you believe fate is a straight line, or a loop? Miguel swallowed. She continued. If it's a straight line, then nothing you do will change what's coming. But if it's a loop, then you've been dying on that road your whole life, just not in this version of you. Miguel shook his head. No. No, I refuse to accept that. You can refuse all you want. But refusing doesn't fix what's broken. Miguel stared at her. What did you see on the highway? Harper's jaw tightened. A version of me that froze to death in a broken-down sedan. A version of me lying under an overturned car. A version of me walking into the desert like she was sleepwalking. A version of me screaming at something I couldn't see. And one version. She swallowed hard. One version that tried to warn me. Miguel's pulse quickened. What did she tell you? Harper looked up at him, eyes dark. She said the road gives warnings. But only to prepare you to meet whichever version of yourself you fear most. Miguel felt sick. What does that even mean? Harper stepped past him. Ask Gentry, she said. He's waiting. The sheriff's secret map. Sheriff Gentry didn't look surprised to see Miguel. He didn't look relieved either. More like he'd been expecting him, and dreading it. Close the door, Ortiz, he said quietly. Miguel did. The office smelled of old coffee and sun-baked paper. Maps of the county lined the walls, some old enough to crumble at the edges. But one map on Gentry's desk stood out, a large sheet pinned under paperweights. Miguel stared at it. It wasn't a map of the county. It was a map of Route 63. With X marks spanning the length of it. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. Each X was labeled with a name. Gentry rubbed his temples. I knew this day would come for you. Miguel sat slowly. What am I looking at? Gentry hesitated. Then he said, everyone who ever died on that highway. Every place the timeline fractured. Every spot the road remembers. Miguel scanned the map, breath shaking. His father's name was there. Javier Ortiz, mile 18.7. A neat black X beside it. Miguel swallowed. Why map this? Because, Gentry said, the road changes shape depending on who's driving it. Those X's. Those are anchor points. They hold the fractures together. Miguel felt cold all over. And me? Gentry placed a finger on a fresh X. One circled in red ink. Miguel Ortiz, mile 17.4. Beside it, pending. Miguel's heart thudded. Pending, he whispered. Gentry nodded grimly. That means it hasn't happened yet. But the road is preparing for it. Miguel leaned back as if struck. You're telling me, the highway is waiting to kill me? No, Gentry corrected quietly. It's waiting for the version of you that dies there to catch up to the version of you that hasn't, yet. Miguel felt nauseous. Harper said something similar, he murmured. Gentry nodded. Harper knows too much for her own good, but she's right. Miguel pressed his palms to his eyes. Why me? Why now? Gentry sighed heavily. Every so often, someone passes through Route 63 at the wrong moment. Usually at 2:11 a.m. If the road marks you, you'll start seeing things. Yourself. Places that shouldn't exist. Times repeating. Loops, Miguel said hollowly. Right, Gentry said. The closer you get to your anchor point, the worse it gets. Miguel swallowed. And when is my anchor point? Gentry pointed at the map. Mile 17.4. Tomorrow night, most likely. Miguel's heart clenched. Tomorrow? Why tomorrow? Gentry hesitated. Then he said, because tomorrow is the anniversary of your father's death. Miguel stared at him, stunned. The sheriff continued. The road doesn't just remember deaths. It remembers the families tied to those deaths. It remembers what remains unfinished. Miguel whispered. My father died on February 11th. Gentry nodded slowly. And tomorrow is February 11th. Miguel felt like he was falling. So I'll die the same day he did? Not necessarily, Gentry said quietly. But the road will try. Miguel slammed his fist into the desk. I'm not letting that happen. Gentry didn't flinch. Then you need to understand something essential. The road only kills you if you go to meet it. Miguel stiffened. What do you mean? Gentry leaned forward. Tomorrow night, don't be on the highway. Don't drive it. Don't approach it. Don't even look at it. Miguel stared. That's it? Just stay away? Yes, Gentry said. Does that work? Gentry exhaled, long and tired. It did for Harper. It didn't for your father. Miguel gripped his knees tightly. What happened to my father? Gentry's face tightened with grief. He hid from the road, stayed home, locked his doors. But the version of him that died on Route 63, the Echo, found its way to him anyway. Miguel felt a cold wave wash over him. You're saying, the dead version of him killed him? Gentry didn't answer. He didn't need to. Miguel understood. The road didn't need you to drive it. If it wanted you, it would bring your death to you. He stood abruptly. I'm not going to be hunted. I'm ending this. Gentry stood too, alarmed. Ortiz, listen to me. But Miguel was already heading for the door. He stopped at the frame, turned back, and said, You told me the road remembers deaths. Then maybe I need to go where mine is waiting. Gentry paled. Don't you dare go near mile 17 tonight. Miguel whispered. I'm already marked. It's time I meet whatever version of myself keeps trying to warn me. And he walked out. Harper's warning. Harper caught up to him outside. You're going back tonight, aren't you? She said. Miguel didn't answer. Harper grabbed his arm. Listen to me. That road doesn't kill you because it wants revenge. It kills you because you are already dead in another timeline. You're just catching up. Miguel pulled his arm free. I'm tired of catching up. Harper stared at him, pity, fear, and respect mixing in her eyes. Then at least take this, she said. From her pocket, she pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Miguel opened it. His breath caught. It was a map. A hand-drawn map of Route 63. But not the sheriff's death map. This map showed a circle drawn around mile 17. What is this? Miguel asked quietly. Harper whispered. The place where timelines overlap. The place where every version of you died. If you go there tonight, you won't be alone. Miguel swallowed hard. And you're giving this to me because... Harper locked eyes with him. Because I don't think you're supposed to stop the road. I think you're supposed to confront the version of yourself that didn't survive. Miguel stared at the map. He folded it slowly. Then whispered. Tonight, then. Harper's expression twisted. I hope you find what you're looking for, Miguel. But I've never known anyone who walked into their own death and walked back out. Miguel walked past her. Then I'll be the first. Climax set up, the road begins to shift early. Miguel drove home, adrenaline already flooding his limbs. He checked the clock. 7:42 p.m. Hours before 2:11. But as he approached the outskirts of Drywell, he saw the asphalt ripple. Just once. Then again. Reality bending early. Miguel whispered. Oh God. The loop is starting sooner tonight. Which meant only one thing. The version of him that died was getting closer. The road wasn't waiting anymore. It was coming. Night fell faster than it should have. Miguel watched the horizon darken like a curtain pulling across a stage. The sky turned a strange shade of purple, then sank into heavy black. The desert wind, which usually lulled across the landscape like a sleepy sigh, had gone silent. Too silent. He grabbed Harper's hand-drawn map, the one marked with a circle around mile 17, and slid it into his jacket pocket. He took his keys, then hesitated. A thought returned. Your death is here. The words the bloody version of himself had whispered still vibrated in Miguel's bones. But something inside him had shifted since then, some stubborn belief that if he ran away, he would only meet his death faster. Running drew the road closer. Facing it made it reveal itself. Miguel muttered, I'm not dying hiding in an apartment. He grabbed his jacket, holstered the .38 revolver, and stepped out into the cold desert night. The wind stirred only once. A single whisper through the dark. Miguel. His father's voice. Miguel swallowed hard but didn't look back. The road begins before he touches it. Miguel didn't drive straight onto Route 63. He took the side roads, circling the highway from a distance, watching for early anomalies. And they came. At 8:52 p.m., hours before the usual time, the sky flickered. Not lightning. Not a power grid. The sky itself bent, as if the stars were blinking between two versions of reality. Miguel whispered, "It's happening early because I'm close." 1 mile from the highway, he began seeing the first fractures. Asphalt flickering between modern and older versions. Road signs swapping years, 1979, 1992, 1954. A telephone pole shaking though there was no wind. A pickup truck passing him twice, same model, same dents, same missing taillight. Miguel gripped the wheel tightly. The loop was forming around him. He rolled up to the final dirt road that fed onto the main highway. Harper had circled it on the map. "Don't enter the highway from the usual path," she had said. "Use this old access road. It brings you directly to the overlap point. The place the road remembers most strongly." Miguel stared down the dark dirt stretch. It looked innocent. But so had every nightmare he'd encountered. He drove forward. As soon as his truck rolled onto the dirt path, his headlights flickered. The radio snapped on with static. Then, a voice came through. Broken. Desperate. "Miguel, don't." Miguel froze. It was his father's voice again. Then the radio went dead. He whispered into the empty cabin. "I'm sorry, Dad. But maybe I'm not here to die. Maybe I'm here to finish what you couldn't." He drove on. The desert splits open. When he reached the last hill before the highway, he stopped and got out. From up there, he could see the whole stretch of mile 17. But tonight, it wasn't one stretch. The desert below him was layered like broken glass, fractured versions of the same landscape superimposed on each other. One version had the 1950s diner glowing. One version had the 1980s gas station blinking. One version had the stretch abandoned and dark. One version had rain falling though the sky was clear. One version looked like a scrapyard of crashed vehicles. Miguel's breath caught. He wasn't just seeing memories. He was seeing timelines layered on top of each other. All the versions of Route 63. All the nights people died. All the futures where they didn't. A shimmering vortex of roads spiraled at mile 17, like a whirlpool made of time, asphalt, and headlights. Miguel whispered, "This is where I died." His knees buckled under the weight of the realization. Every alternate version of him who had died on this road died here. Multiple Miguels appear. Miguel forced himself down the hill. And when he reached the asphalt, he saw them. 5 silhouettes. 5 men standing across the road, spaced apart as if arranged deliberately. All of them were Miguel. Different ages. Different wounds. Different expressions. One had a bandaged head. One had burns across his arm. One had a crushed chest. One was soaking wet, drowned. One had dust so thick on his clothes he looked mummified. But all of them stared at him. Miguel couldn't move. Then one stepped forward, the drowned one, water dripping in rivulets across the asphalt. "You came back," it whispered. Then the burned Miguel spoke, voice like cracking metal. "We all thought you would." The crushed chest Miguel added, "You had to meet us eventually." Miguel stumbled backward. What are you?" The drowned Miguel said quietly. "We are the versions of you that never left mile 17. Miguel shook his head wildly. "No, I know, this is not real." The bandaged Miguel replied. "It's as real as any death you could have had." Miguel's breath shook. "I'm alive. All of us were once," the dusty Miguel murmured.
Miguel drew the .38, shaking. "Don't come closer." The drowned Miguel stepped forward anyway. "You think a gun can stop what you already are?" Miguel aimed it. "I'm not you." All five spoke in unison. "You are exactly us." Miguel's stomach dropped like falling into a ravine. The drowned Miguel reached out a hand. "We're not here to kill you." The burned Miguel nodded. "We're here to show you how to survive." Miguel trembled. "By doing what?" The crushed chest Miguel whispered. "By choosing which version of you becomes real." Miguel blinked. "What does that mean?" The dusty Miguel pointed behind Miguel. "You brought someone with you." Miguel spun. No one was there. No one physical. But in the flickering headlights of one of the timelines, a shadow formed. A tall man. Heavy boots. Old jacket. Miguel's father. He stepped forward, half in this world and half in the fracture. His voice was soft, breaking. "Mijo, you weren't supposed to follow me." Miguel's throat closed. "Dad?" His father nodded weakly. "I tried to keep you off this road. But the road remembers bloodlines. You were always going to end up here." Miguel fell to his knees. "Why didn't you warn me earlier?" Javier Ortiz knelt with him. "I did. Every night. But the living can only hear the dead when the loop opens." The drowned Miguel spoke again. "You cannot leave until you choose." Miguel looked between them. "What choice?" The bandaged Miguel pointed at the center of the fractured miles, a swirling vortex of lights and winding asphalt. "At the center of mile 17 is your anchor point. The exact second you died in every timeline." The burned Miguel added, "If you step into it, you replace all of us." Miguel stared. "And if I don't?" The crushed chest Miguel answered. "Then one of us replaces you." Miguel felt cold collapse into his spine. "So either I die, or I let one of you become me?" The dusty Miguel nodded. "That's the price of the loop." Miguel stood, revolver shaking in his hand. "I won't let any version of me kill the real me." His father touched his shoulder. "Mijo, none of them want to kill you." Miguel looked up, confused. His father whispered, "They want to be you." Miguel froze. "Why?" Javier Ortiz looked around at the fractured versions of his son. "Because every one of them died alone. Every one of them lost their life too soon. Every one of them is trapped here, looping the moment of their death forever." The drowned version choked. "We see you living." The burned version whispered, "We want that." The bandaged one pleaded, "Give one of us your place." Miguel stepped back in horror. "No. No, I won't." All five shadows tensed. Javier's voice cracked. "Then the road will choose for you." Miguel screamed. "No! The highway attacks." The ground trembled. The desert split. One timeline began overpowering the others. The version where Miguel's truck collided with a semi. The version where he burned alive in the diner fire. The version where he froze to death. The version where he drowned in a flash flood. The version where he stepped into oncoming headlights. Miguel saw all those deaths overlaying each other. The road was choosing. And choosing violently. The drowned Miguel suddenly lunged with desperation. "Let me live." Miguel fired the gun. The drowned version dissolved into water vapor. The burned Miguel rushed him.
Please, I wasn't ready to die. Miguel fired again. This version shattered into ash and light. The dusty Miguel reached out. Take me with you. Miguel ran backwards, shouting. Stop! His father shouted too. Miguel, run to the anchor point. Only you can close the loop. Miguel sprinted toward the glowing vortex in the fractured road. Behind him, his other selves screamed, grief, rage, desperation. They chased him. Voices merging, pleading, echoing. Let me be you. I don't want to die again. You don't deserve to live more than me. Please, let me out. Miguel dived into the center of the fracture. Light swallowed him. The center of every death. Inside the anchor point, there was no road. There was only darkness and the echo of his own breath. Then, flash. Miguel saw himself driving, headlights blinding, a semi screaming toward him. Flash. He saw himself freezing in a dead battery sedan. Flash. He saw himself burned inside the diner fire. Flash. He saw himself drowning under floodwater. Flash. He saw himself lying unconscious on mile 17 while a truck veered. Flash. He saw the version of himself who had survived the longest, the one who made it all the way to this moment. Himself. Alive. Breathing. Fighting. A voice filled the dark. His father's. Nijo, you're the only version of you strong enough to see all the others and not fall apart. Miguel gasped. Dad? You are not here to die, Javier whispered. You are here to choose. Miguel cried out. I choose me. The fractured world cracked open. A scream tore through the void, all the versions of himself crying out at once. No! The vortex collapsed. Time snapped shut. Miguel fell. And hit asphalt. The road lets him go. Miguel lay on his back, staring at the sky. A normal night sky. No fractures. No loops. No neon diner. No alternate selves. Just Route 63. Dark. Silent. Ordinary. He sat up, gasping. He was alone. Truly alone. His father wasn't there. His shadows weren't there. He stood shakily. At mile 17, the map Gentry had drawn would have shown a death marked, pending. But Miguel was alive. He whispered. I broke it. I broke the loop. Something shimmered in the dirt. He bent down and picked it up. A dog tag. The same one as before, except the engraving was now complete. Ortiz, Miguel J. DOB, November 6, 1986. DOD, never. Miguel stared until tears blurred the metal. A soft wind passed behind him. He turned, knowing what he would see. His father. Smiling. Vite, Nijo, Javier said softly. Go. Live. Your road is yours now. Miguel stepped forward to embrace him. But Javier faded into dust. The desert breathed gently. The highway remained still. Miguel walked back to his truck. He turned the key. The engine started perfectly. He drove away from mile 17 without looking in the mirror. For the first time in days, the radio was silent. For the first time in years, he felt alive. And behind him, in the desert, the asphalt laid still, like a beast finally satisfied. Epilogue, 6 months later. Miguel never drove Route 63 at night again. He moved south, bought a small garage in Tucson, and lived quietly. No loops. No shadows. No alternate selves. Some nights, he stood outside his shop and looked at the desert sky. Once in a while, he felt watched. But not by something hungry. Not by something broken. By something remembering. One night, he heard a faint whisper on the wind. "Thank you." He didn't know which version of himself said it. But he whispered back, "You're welcome." And the highway never came for him again. Have a nice day. Thank you for watching.